Hey everyone, it's Justin. Thank you for watching and welcome to my house. That's Justin's house. In this video, I want to talk to you about the REST API trigger that I most recently used in my integration between Bitbucket and ServiceNow Agile teams. And everything worked, but there was a big gotcha, and it was my first time ever doing a REST API trigger in ServiceNow in Flow Designer. I've actually personally never even done a scripted REST API, so you can imagine I was a little lacking on the knowledge. I was following the documentation, and here's what tripped me up. So when you set this up, you build out a REST trigger, and everything was pretty straightforward. I picked a HTTP method, which was going to be post. I knew from looking at Bitbucket that it was going to be sending a post message. This got automatically made for me, and I knew I didn't need any query parameters, which I could have specified down here or here in the path parameters and drop those pills into this piece right here. I didn't have any of that complication, and I thought all I needed to do once I picked post, watch what happens when you pick something else. If I do a get, you get some changes there, my body goes away. So when I had post, it automatically populated this with application/JSON and body. Now, what I was expecting, let's go look at Bitbucket real quick. If we look at Bitbucket, all I'm doing is sending a push from Bitbucket to ServiceNow. That's it. That's the extent. I didn't pick any of those other boxes. And what I get, the payload, you can see right here. Pardon all my extra tabs in Notepad++, but this is the entire payload. A lot of stuff is coming in that request or that post message from Bitbucket to ServiceNow. So my assumption was, naive as I was, is that this, let's see how many lines is it? 345 lines is what I was going to get in the response body. And so I was like, oh, good, I've got body there, I can move on. And I'm ashamed to admit, I hit the done button and I moved on, and I left everything like it was, and it wasn't working, it wasn't working, it wasn't working. It was calling this flow, it was executing, but I never got anything here in the request body. This request body was always blank, and I could not figure out why. I searched, I Googled, I didn't ask AI in this example, and I just couldn't figure it out. And then I watched a video. Thank you, Chuck Tomasi and the ServiceNow dev team. It was an old video, but it was basically how to use this REST API trigger. And my aha moment came when, in that video, they started building out that body and adding things to it. So you'll see, and the one that actually shows in my demo, it's actually built out with all of the different fields that are in that big payload that I just showed you in Notepad++. Now, the big difference is, I didn't grab everything, so I did find that pretty neat. I didn't need to pull in stuff that I didn't want. So I pulled in the author raw, but I didn't pull in my user information, my self-link, my avatar, HTML. I didn't pull any of that stuff in. All I did on this particular build out is added the things that I needed, which was I needed the push object, I needed the changes object array, I needed the commits object array, and then I needed the commit object, the author object, the message string, the links object, and then the HTML string within that. So very, very tiny subset of what was in that big payload. And I was fortunate enough to have used the REST action before in Flow Designer, where you can copy and paste a sample payload in here and generate the complex object output and use that. So I was familiar with that, and I actually just happened to go do that because at first, if you look at this first one here, I have a step to go parse the Bitbucket payload because I thought I had to do that work. But it turns out this trigger, when used properly and you know how to use it, actually does that parsing for you so long as you populate this body information within the REST API trigger. So the second gotcha that is probably, again, straightforward to a lot of people, but I'm going to include it here because I don't know everything, and I have to assume that not everybody else knows everything. And so when we're looking at a JSON object, there's a couple of cheat codes you can use here. Number one is the indentation of this JSON object. So that's its reflection of nesting that's going on in the JSON object, and the use of curly braces. So notice I have one big curly brace, and then I have a curly brace after push. So this is the JSON notation for letting me know that this big entire thing, this first curly brace, is there's an object coming. And for the push, I have another curly brace saying, hey, there's another object coming. But this is a bracket, not a curly brace. And a bracket means it's not an object coming, it's an array of objects coming. An array meaning you can have this repeat 1 to n number of times like you would in an array, And that's how you know to set up these differently. So if you look behind me here, notice that some of these are objects and some of these are array.objects when I'm building out that body. And of course, the values that I actually want are strings. So what's the takeaway for this? What should you learn from this particular video? Number one is the REST API trigger, very helpful. You do not need to write a scripted REST API for the particular use case I did, or maybe not all of your use cases, but don't be a dummy like I was and just assume that ServiceNow is going to accept the entire response and build out a complex object for you without you predetermining or letting the system know exactly what information it should be looking for in that payload. And that's what I did here, and that's what actually worked. That's what made my Bitbucket and ServiceNow Agile Teams integration work together, play nice together, however you want to put it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like, please subscribe, or share it with somebody who you think might be interested in saving hours and hours and hours and hours of wasted time trying to figure out why their request body wasn't building its own complex object all by itself. And until next time, don't forget to always be learning.